All right, let's just jump right in. Today, we're going to be detectives, digging into one single ancient Greek word that almost everyone thinks they know, ekklēsia. But what if I told you that for centuries, we might have been missing its real powerful meaning because of a simple translation choice?
Seriously, think about it. When I say the word church, what pops into your head? Probably a building, right? Or maybe an organization, a Sunday service. But what if the original word, the one used for 2,000 years, had almost nothing to do with any of that?
And this, right here, is the heart of the mystery. On the left, we've got our usual translations: church, assembly, institution. But over on the right, well, that's the original meaning, a called-out people. Now that's not just a tiny little difference in wording, that's a complete shift in what it means. So the question is, how on earth did we go from a people to a place? Let's follow the clues.
Okay, first things first, we've got to go back to the source. We're going to crack this word open, look right at its DNA, and see what it was actually built to mean. Think of this as our linguistic forensics lab.
So here it is, ekklēsia. And its core definition is a group that is actively summoned or called out from a bigger crowd. The keywords here are selection and separation. It's about being deliberately chosen for something.
And this all makes perfect sense when you just break the word in two. It's a compound word. First you have ek, which means out of or from among. Then you have kaleo, which means to call or to summon. You put them together, and what do you get? To call out from. It's literally baked right into the word. It's an action, a summons, not just a bunch of people who happen to show up.
And this is the point we really have to get. Well, a called-out group will probably, gather somewhere. The main point of the word isn't the gathering, it's the calling. The identity comes from the summons itself, not from the meeting that happens after.
Okay, so we've got the word's DNA. It clearly means to call out. But hey, did anyone actually use it that way back in the ancient world? To figure that out, we need to go hunting for clues, specifically in the centuries before this word had anything to do with Christianity.
And our first huge piece of evidence comes from the Septuagint. This was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, done a couple of centuries before the New Testament was even written. And when the Jewish scholars translating it needed a word for the Hebrew term qahal, the word they chose was ekklēsia.
So what did qahal mean? You guessed it. It meant a summoned or chosen group. The perfect example was the people of Israel itself, understood as a people who were called out and set apart from all the other nations. So, long before Christianity, ekklēsia was already tied to this idea of a chosen, separate people.
And you know what? This wasn't just a religious idea. If you look at secular Greek society, the exact same pattern holds true. I mean, you've got Xenophon talking about Spartans summoning their allies. You have Plato describing citizens being called out to choose their leaders. Aristotle uses it for the citizenry called out to vote. In every case, the ekklēsia is a group of citizens summoned from the general population for a specific task. It was never, ever a building or a permanent institution.
So, we've seen the word's DNA, and we've seen how it was used in history. That brings us to our star witnesses, the very first Christian writers. Did they understand the word the same way? Let's check out their testimony.
Let's start with this guy, Ignatius of Antioch. He's writing around the year 110, so just one generation after the apostles. Here, in the original Greek, he talks about being in one body of his ekklēsia. So, what's he getting at?
Well, if we just read it for what it says, without our modern ideas of church, the meaning is pretty clear. He's not talking about being in a building, he's describing a people. A single living body made up of individuals who have been called out from all over the place to become one group.
And Ignatius wasn't some outlier. You look at the other early writers, Clement of Rome, the Shepherd of Hermas, and the theme is totally consistent. They call the ekklēsia a sojourning people, a living group. They're always defined by this divine call. And you know what's missing? Any talk of buildings. Any mention of hierarchies or institutional government. It's just not there. So the evidence seems pretty overwhelming, right? For centuries, ekklēsia meant a summoned people. So what happened? How did we lose that dynamic meaning and replace it with the idea of a building? This is the twist in the story, where the case goes cold, and we have to figure out what went wrong.
This timeline really lays it all out. You can see the original meaning holding steady for centuries. But then, bam, after the 4th century, there's this massive conceptual shift when the ekklēsia gets tied up with the Roman state. Then way later, in the 19th century, translators come along and basically project that new institutional idea all the way back onto the ancient texts.
So it really boils down to two key culprits. First, you have the historical shift. The idea itself changed from a dynamic people to a formal, state-backed institution. Then, much later, you get the translator bias. Scholars who were living in a world with institutional churches chose the English word church, which carried all that new institutional baggage, and used it to translate ekklēsia.
Okay, we followed the evidence trail, from the word's very DNA, through its ancient history, all the way to the eyewitnesses. We even found a motive for how the meaning got changed. After all of that, it's time for the verdict.
The evidence trail is just crystal clear. The word's own structure means called out. Its history, both in secular Greece and the Septuagint, points to a summoned group. The earliest Christians absolutely understood it as a people defined by a divine call, and we have a pretty clear picture of how that original meaning got lost in translation.
And that brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. The original meaning of ekklēsia is about identity. It's not about a location you go to or an organization you belong to. It's about who you are.
Look, this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. Getting this original meaning back actually has huge implications. How does it change the way we think if we shift from an institution we attend to an identity we are?
When you boil it all down, the evidence points to a really simple but kind of revolutionary idea. The ekklēsia isn't a place you go to. It's a people you are, a people called out. And that is definitely something worth thinking about.